The Montana sun bled crimson across the sage-covered hills as Cole Morgan rode the dying light. 5 years since drought stole his ranch. 5 years of drifting like tumbleweed across a hostile land. His mother's hymn rose unbidden to his lips, the melody lost in the wind that carried memories of everything he'd surrendered. His mare nickered, ears pricked forward. Cole's weathered hand found the Spencer carbine before remembering his vow, no more violence. Then he saw it calico fabric snagged on thorns, still fluttering, blood drops on sage leaves, wet enough to glisten. A woman's satchel lay torn open beside the wagon road. Letters scattered like dead birds. His fingers trembled as he lifted one. Dear Mrs. Sullivan, your journey to Willow Creek. The rest was torn away. Cole studied the darkening horizon. Whatever happened here was recent. Someone needed help. He turned his horse east, following the blood trail into gathering darkness. Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. 2. The trail led down into a shallow ravine where the wagon road curved between weathered sandstone formations. Cole's mare picked her way carefully through the loose shale, her breath misting in the cooling air. The blood drops were more frequent now, dark pennies against the pale dust. His grandmother would have recognized the sign: someone running, stumbling, desperate. He found her beside a lightning-struck cottonwood, crumpled like a discarded doll against its blackened trunk. Her traveling dress, once the respectable brown of Eastern propriety, was torn at the shoulder and stained with dirt and blood. Dark hair had escaped from what must have been a careful arrangement of pins and combs, now hanging loose across her face. She lay terrifyingly still. Cole dismounted slowly, speaking soft words to his horse before approaching. His boots crunched on the gravel, the only sound besides the evening wind through the sage. He knelt beside her, his rough fingers gentle as he brushed the hair from her face. She was young, perhaps 25, with features that spoke of mixed heritage, high cheekbones, skin the color of prairie wheat touched by sun. "Ma'am," his voice came out hoarse from disuse. How long since he'd spoken to another person? 3 weeks, 4. No response. But when he placed his fingers against her throat, he felt a pulse, quick and thready like a frightened bird's. Relief flooded through him. He examined her carefully, his mother's teachings coming back. Defensive wounds on her forearms, she'd fought someone. A gash on her temple, already crusting with dried blood. Her bodice was torn, but not in ways that suggested. He pushed that thought away. Someone had hurt her, but perhaps not in the worst way. Cole fetched his canteen, cradling her head as he dripped water between her cracked lips. She stirred slightly, a soft moan escaping. He tore strips from his only other shirt, the blue one he saved for town visits that never came anymore. The wounds needed cleaning. In his saddlebag, he found the small jar of prickly pear juice his grandmother had taught him to make better than any store-bought medicine for preventing infection. As he worked, she began to mumble, words tumbling out in confusion. Some were English. "No, please. I won't tell." Others were different, a language he recognized as Lakota from his years trading with the tribes before everything went wrong. Thoketu, Wichasha Shicha, enemy, bad men. The sun had vanished completely now, leaving only purple twilight. Cole built a small fire using buffalo chips he'd gathered from the prairie, keeping it low and smokeless. He couldn't risk attracting whoever had done this, but she needed warmth. Her skin felt too cold despite the day's earlier heat. He boiled water in his battered tin pot, adding willow bark from the tree above them. Another grandmother remedy, it would help with pain and fever. As the tea steeped, he studied her more carefully in the firelight. Her clothes were well-made but practical, not the finery of a wealthy woman. The cameo brooch at her throat looked like a family heirloom. In the scattered contents of her satchel, he'd found a McGuffey reader, the kind used for teaching, and more letters, all addressed to Mrs. Eleanor Sullivan, a mail-order bride. Cole had seen them before, women brave or desperate enough to travel west to marry men they'd never met. But something had gone wrong with this one's journey. She stirred again as he lifted her head to try the willow bark tea. This time her eyes opened deep brown, unfocused with pain and fever, but alert enough to show fear. Her hand moved weakly toward her boot, where he glimpsed the handle of a small knife. "Easy," Cole said, keeping his voice low and calm, the way he'd speak to a spooked horse. "You're safe now. I'm not going to hurt you." Her eyes searched his face, taking in his weathered features, the week's worth of stubble, the premature gray at his temples. Something in what she saw must have reassured her, because her hand fell away from the knife. "Washichu waste," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Good white man." Then, in English, "The men." From the stage station. They knew. They found out what I am. "Shh," Cole said, helping her take another sip of tea. "Don't need to talk now. Rest." But she gripped his wrist with surprising strength. "They're coming. My uncle's people. They'll think you." That's when Cole heard it, the thunder of many horses approaching fast through the darkness. His mare whinnied nervously, and Cole felt his heart rate spike. He looked at his gun belt, coiled near his saddle, then made a decision. Moving deliberately, he walked over and hung it high on a broken branch of the cottonwood, far from reach. If these were her people coming, showing weapons would only make things worse. The hoofbeats grew louder, and Cole moved back to Eleanor's side, keeping his hands visible, continuing to tend her wounds as if he hadn't heard death approaching on horseback. The fire crackled between them and the darkness beyond, and Cole found himself humming his mother's hymn again, not from nervousness, but as a prayer. Let them see he meant no harm. Let them understand. Eleanor's eyes had closed again, but her breathing was steadier. The willow bark was working. Cole dipped his cloth in the water and continued cleaning the gash on her temple, his movements steady despite the approaching danger. Whatever came next, he'd done what was right. That had to count for something, even if it was the last thing he ever did. They came like thunder given form, 20 riders bursting from the darkness into the firelight's circle. Cole didn't move from where he knelt beside Eleanor, didn't even look up as the horses formed a tight ring around them, their breath steaming in the cold night air. He kept his hands visible, continuing to wring out the bloodied cloth in the pot of water, his movements deliberate and calm. "You there, white man." The voice cracked like a whip, young and full of barely contained rage. "Step away from her." Cole finally looked up, meeting the speaker's eyes without challenge or fear. The warrior couldn't have been more than 20, his face painted with ochre and charcoal, a rifle across his lap. Around him, the other riders waited, weapons ready but not yet aimed. They were Lakota. That much was certain from their dress and the few words he'd caught in their approach. "She's hurt," Cole said simply, his voice steady. "Needs tending." "I said move." The young warrior's horse danced sideways, sensing its rider's agitation. Cole considered his options. Moving might seem like guilt or fear. Staying might provoke violence. Instead, he did something unexpected. He began talking to his mare in the same low, soothing tone he'd used to calm her during a storm. "Easy, girl. These folks are just worried about their kin. No need for excitement. Stand steady now. That's my good girl." The mare, well-trained and trusting, stood perfectly still despite being surrounded by strange horses and armed riders. The demonstration wasn't lost on the Lakota. A man who could keep his horse calm in such circumstances was either very foolish or very confident. More importantly, a horse that trusted its rider that completely spoke volumes about the man's character. An older rider pushed through the circle, and Cole recognized the bearing of leadership immediately. This man was perhaps 60, his hair streaked with silver, wearing a mixture of traditional dress and traded goods, a wool coat over leather leggings, eagle feathers in his braided hair. His eyes, even in the firelight, were sharp as obsidian, taking in everything: Cole's position, the hung gun belt in the tree, Eleanor's bandaged wounds, the small fire of buffalo chips rather than wood that might attract attention. "Uncle?" Eleanor's voice was weak but clear. and she'd managed to push herself up on one elbow. She spoke in Lakota, words tumbling out rapid and urgent. Cole caught only fragments his name when she pointed to him, something about the stage station, bad men. The older man, White Crow. She'd called him, dismounted with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime on horseback. He walked slowly around the fire, studying the scene. His gaze lingered on the gun belt hanging in the tree, then moved to Cole's hands steady, blood-stained from tending wounds, calloused from work rather than gunplay. "You are alone," White Crow said in accented but clear English. It wasn't a question. "Yes. You found my niece." "I did. And your first action was to remove your weapon." White Crow gestured to the tree. Cole met his gaze directly. "Figured if her people came, showing iron wouldn't help anybody. She needs care, not more violence." The young warrior from earlier dismounted, his movements aggressive. "How do we know he didn't hurt her himself? Look at the blood on his hands." "From tending her wounds," Cole said, still not moving from Eleanor's side. "Check the cloth, the water. I used prickly pear juice to clean the cuts, my grandmother's recipe. Lakota taught her that remedy, years back." Eleanor tried to sit up further, switching to English. "Red Sky, please. He saved me. The men at Rock Creek Station, they found out about my mother, about what I am. Said no half-breed was going to marry a white man in their town, that they'd teach me my place." Her voice broke slightly. "This man, Cole, he found me. He's been nothing but kind." Red Sky spat on the ground. "Kind white men don't know kindness." "This one does," Eleanor insisted, then swayed, her strength failing. Cole caught her before she could fall, supporting her gently. The movement was so natural, so careful, that several of the riders relaxed their aggressive postures. White Crow observed it all, his expression unreadable. "You have medicine," White Crow said, nodding to the pot of tea. "Willow bark tea, for the fever and pain. You know our remedies. Some, learned from trading. Before," Cole hesitated, then added, "before I lost everything and took to drifting." White Crow walked closer, close enough that Cole could see the intricate beadwork on his coat, smell the smoke and leather and sage that clung to him. The elder studied Cole's face with an intensity that seemed to look past skin and bone to something deeper. "You have empty hands," White Crow said finally. It was an odd statement, but Cole understood. "Been that way for 5 years now. Land took everything I had. Drought, banks, bad luck. Got nothing left but my horse and what's in those bags. Yet you stopped to help. Man sees someone hurt. He helps. That's all." Red Sky made a disgusted sound. "Pretty words. White men always have pretty words before they show their true nature." Eleanor managed to speak again, her voice stronger with urgency. "He protected me. Could have ridden past. Could have taken advantage. Could have done anything. Instead, he tore up his own shirt for bandages. Look," she gestured weakly to the blue fabric strips. "His good shirt. The one for town." White Crow knelt beside them, his movements careful and dignified. He examined Eleanor's wounds, noting the careful cleaning, the precise bandaging. His fingers were gentle as he checked her fever, and Cole saw real affection in the old man's eyes. This wasn't just a niece, but someone deeply loved. "The men who did this," White Crow said, not looking at Cole. "Where are they?" "Don't know," Cole answered honestly. "Found her like this. Trail suggested they headed back west, maybe to Rock Creek or beyond. You didn't follow them. She needed help more than they needed killing." This answer seemed to surprise White Crow. He sat back on his heels, studying Cole anew. "You're armed. That rifle, the pistol in the tree. You could have sought vengeance. Promised myself 5 years ago no more violence. Haven't broken that promise yet. Even to defend yourself. Haven't had to. Most trouble can be avoided by a man who pays attention and shows respect. Red Sky laughed bitterly. And when trouble can't be avoided, when soldiers come to burn our lodges. Cole met the young man's angry gaze. Then I'd stand with those being wronged. Done it before. Got the scars to prove it. Words! Red Sky spat again. Just words. White Crow raised his hand for silence. He stood slowly. Decision made. You'll come with us. It wasn't a request, but it wasn't quite a command either. Cole understood he was being given a choice: come willingly or be taken. Either way, they wouldn't leave him here with Eleanor injured and vulnerable. She shouldn't be moved far, Cole said. The head wound. Our camp is close. 2 miles. No more. We have healers. Cole nodded. I'll need my gear. And my gun not to wear. Just to pack away. Don't like leaving it for anyone to find. White Crow considered this, then nodded to one of his men. The warrior retrieved the gun belt from the tree, handling it carefully before packing it in Cole's saddlebags. The respect for the weapon, even while denying its use, spoke of pragmatism rather than trust. As they prepared to move, Cole fashioning a travois with help from 2 of the warriors, he noticed how they watched him not with the hostility of enemies, but with the careful attention of those reserving judgment. When he offered his coffee and hardtack to share while they worked, the gesture was met with surprise. Red Sky refused, but 2 older warriors accepted, and Cole saw White Crow's slight nod of approval. Eleanor was settled onto the travois with buffalo robes and trade blankets, her fever seeming to ease with the knowledge she was among family. As they prepared to ride, she caught Cole's hand. "Thank you," she whispered in English, then added in Lakota, "Wopila." "Thanks." White Crow mounted his horse with easy grace, looking down at Cole. "You ride with us, but understand if you prove false. If this is deception." "It's not," Cole said simply, swinging up onto his mare. "I'm just a man who found someone who needed help." "We shall see," White Crow said, then called out commands in Lakota. The party moved out into the darkness. Cole riding in their midst, not quite prisoner, not quite guest. The stars wheeled overhead, bright in the clear night, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. Cole found himself thinking of his grandmother's words about kindness being its own reward. He hadn't believed her then, young and full of ambition. Now, riding through the night with people who had every reason to hate him, protecting a woman whose courage had brought her to this violent land. He began to understand what she meant. The camp appeared gradually, lodge fires glowing like earthbound stars against the darkness. Dogs barked at their approach, and people emerged from teepees to see what the night had brought. Cole kept his posture relaxed, his hands visible on the saddle horn, as they rode into the heart of the Lakota camp. Whatever came next, he'd met it with the same steady calm that had carried him through 5 years of loss and wandering. He was tired of being empty-handed. Maybe here, in the last place he'd expected, he might find something worth holding on to. The Lakota camp spread across a natural bowl in the hills near the Sweetgrass Mountains, sheltered from the worst winds but open to the stars. Perhaps 30 lodges stood in the traditional circle, their buffalo hide covers painted with stories and symbols that seemed to move in the firelight. The smell of smoke, cooking meat, and cured leather filled the air, familiar and foreign at once. As their party rode through the camp opening, faces appeared at lodge entrances, women pausing in their evening work, children peering around their mothers' skirts, old men smoking pipes by their fires. The dogs came first, a pack of them rushing toward the horses with territorial aggression. Cole tensed, expecting the usual snarling and snapping that camp dogs showed strangers. But something strange happened. The lead dog, a large yellow mongrel with one torn ear, slowed as it approached his mare. The animal circled them once, nose high, then simply turned away, followed by the rest of the pack. They returned to their spots by the lodges as if Cole posed no threat worth their attention. Red Sky noticed, his scowl deepening. Even the dogs are fooled. Dogs know what men sometimes miss, White Crow said mildly, dismounting before a large lodge painted with flying eagles. A woman emerged handsome despite her years, with steel-gray hair in long braids and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She wore a dress of soft doeskin decorated with elk teeth, and her bearing spoke of quiet authority. "My wife, Morning Star," White Crow said to Cole. Then in Lakota, he explained the situation. Cole caught Eleanor's name, or rather, what he learned was her Lakota name, Wiaka Washte. Good feather. Morning Star's expression shifted from wary to concerned as she saw Eleanor on the travois. She called out sharp commands, and several women appeared, lifting Eleanor with practiced efficiency. As they prepared to carry her into the lodge, Cole moved to follow, then stopped. Without thinking, he bent to remove his boots at the entrance, setting them neatly beside the others already there. It was a small gesture, one his grandmother had taught him years ago when visiting the Cherokee traders, but Morning Star paused, looking back at him with surprise and something that might have been approval. She nodded once, then gestured for him to enter. The lodge was larger inside than Cole expected, with a fire pit in the center and beds arranged around the edges. Buffalo robes and Hudson Bay blankets created comfortable spaces, and parfleches painted rawhide containers held the family's belongings. They laid Eleanor on a bed near the fire, and an elderly woman with gnarled hands but gentle touch began examining her wounds. "This is Singing Crow," Morning Star explained in careful English. "She knows healing." Singing Crow unwrapped Cole's makeshift bandages, examining his work with critical eyes. She said something in Lakota that made Morning Star smile slightly. "She says you did well for a white man." The prickly pear was good thinking. "My grandmother learned from the Comanche, years back, taught me what she knew." Singing Crow began mixing herbs in a wooden bowl, prairie sage, something that looked like willow bark, and other plants Cole didn't recognize. She worked with the focused intensity of long practice, grinding the mixture with a smooth stone. When she added bear grease to make a poultice, the smell was pungent but not unpleasant. "Hold her shoulders," Morning Star instructed. "This will hurt." Cole knelt beside Eleanor, placing his hands gently but firmly on her shoulders. She was conscious but weak, her eyes finding his face. "It's all right," he said softly. "These women know what they're doing." As Singing Crow applied the poultice to the head wound, Eleanor gasped, her body tensing. Cole found himself humming his mother's hymn again, low and steady, and surprisingly, Eleanor relaxed slightly. When it was done, she was trembling but calm. "Wopila," she whispered to Singing Crow, then to Cole. "Don't leave." "I won't go far," he promised. White Crow appeared at the lodge entrance. "Come, you'll stay with my nephew's family tonight. Tomorrow we decide what to do with you." Outside, the camp had settled into evening routines. Women tended fires and prepared food. Men gathered in small groups to smoke and talk. Children played games in the fading light. Cole retrieved his saddlebags and followed White Crow to a smaller lodge on the circle's eastern side. "My nephew travels with a hunting party," White Crow explained. "His wife, Spotted Fawn, will give you shelter." Spotted Fawn was young, perhaps 20, with a baby on her hip and a toddler hiding behind her skirts. She looked nervous but not unkind, gesturing for Cole to place his belongings near the lodge wall. The space was clearly defined. He was inside, but separate, a guest whose status remained uncertain. As he settled his few possessions, Cole noticed a damaged travois leaning against the lodge. One of the poles had cracked, and the lashing was coming undone. Without asking, he retrieved his knife and began working on it, using skills learned from years of maintaining his own equipment. Spotted Fawn watched warily at first, then seemed to relax as she realized he was helping. A crowd began to gather, children mostly, drawn by curiosity about the strange white man. They whispered and giggled, pushing each other forward to get a closer look. Cole kept working but acknowledged them with occasional glances and half-smiles. When one brave boy of perhaps 8 came close enough, Cole handed him the leather strips to hold while he worked. The boy's eyes widened, but he took them, holding them exactly as Cole showed him. Soon 3 more children were helping, and Cole found himself teaching them knots, his limited Lakota supplemented by gestures and demonstrations. When the travois was repaired, stronger than before, the children cheered. That's when the older boys arrived, teenagers with the swagger of those testing their courage. One of them, tall and lean with fresh warrior markings, said something challenging in Lakota, gesturing toward the horses. Cole looked to Spotted Fawn, who translated reluctantly. He asks if white men can really ride, or if they just sit on horses like bags of grain. The challenge was clear: prove himself or be marked as weak. Cole stood slowly, brushing dust from his worn pants. "Tell him I ride well enough to get where I'm going." The boys laughed, and their leader Cole learned his name was Swift Elk, made an elaborate gesture of invitation toward the horse herd. A crowd was forming, adults now joining the children. This was entertainment, but also evaluation. Cole followed them to where the horses grazed under the watch of young guards. Swift Elk selected a paint pony, sturdy and clearly spirited, without saddle or even blanket, just a rope hackamore for control. "This one," Swift Elk said in broken English, grinning. "You ride." Cole studied the horse, noting its rolling eye and tense muscles. This was no gentle mount but a half-wild pony that would test any rider. He approached slowly, letting the animal see and smell him, speaking softly in the mix of English and nonsense sounds he used with all horses. The pony's ears flicked forward, curious despite its nerves. When Cole swung up onto its back, the pony exploded into motion, bucking, spinning, trying every trick to unseat this stranger. Cole didn't fight it, didn't try to dominate. Instead, he moved with the horse, keeping his seat through balance and timing rather than force. His style was different from the Lakota way, less showy, more focused on partnership than conquest. After what seemed like forever, but was probably only minutes, the pony settled into a rough trot, then a walk. Cole guided it in a circle around the watching crowd, then slid off, patting its neck in thanks. The pony snorted but didn't move away. There was silence for a moment. Then one of the older men laughed and said something that made others nod. Swift Elk looked slightly disappointed but also impressed. He offered his hand in the white man's fashion, and Cole shook it firmly. "You ride different," Swift Elk said, "but good." As they walked back to camp, Red Sky intercepted them. "One lucky ride doesn't make you welcome here." "Not trying to prove anything," Cole replied. "Just accepting hospitality when offered." That evening, Spotted Fawn invited him to share their meal, a stew of buffalo meat with wild turnips and onions. Cole contributed the last of his coffee, which was received with pleasure. As they ate, the children who'd helped with the travois crept closer, obviously wanting to hear stories. Cole found himself telling them about his ranch, using hand gestures and drawing pictures in the dirt when language failed. He showed them how he'd built his cabin, log by log, how the drought had started slow then consumed everything. The children listened with wide eyes, especially when he described the great dust storms that turned day to night. An old man joined them, introducing himself as Broken Wing. He translated Cole's stories more fully, and soon adults were listening too. When Cole told of losing his cattle one by one, of watching his fields turn to dust, there were nods of understanding. These people knew about loss, about forces beyond control taking everything. As the evening grew late, Cole excused himself to check on Eleanor. White Crow granted permission, though Red Sky insisted on accompanying him. They found her sleeping fitfully, her fever rising again despite the healing woman's efforts. Morning Star was there, placing cool cloths on Eleanor's forehead. "The wound is infected," Morning Star said quietly. "Sometimes our medicine isn't enough." Cole knelt beside the bed, studying Eleanor's flushed face. "There's something else we could try. My grandmother used to make a tea from moldy bread. Sounds strange, but it fought infection, saw it work on wounds that wouldn't heal any other way." Singing Crow looked skeptical, but Morning Star was desperate enough to listen. "You know how to make this. Knead bread first, flour and water. Let it sit until it molds right, takes a day or two. Then steep it strong. Clean the wound with it. Have her drink some if she can." White Crow, who'd been listening from the entrance, spoke. "We have flour from the traders. You'll show Singing Crow." Cole nodded. "Everything I know." They worked through the night, Cole teaching the elderly healer his grandmother's strange remedy while taking turns with Morningstar keeping Eleanor cool. Red Sky watched from the shadows, suspicious but no longer openly hostile. When Eleanor's fever broke just before dawn, everyone was too exhausted to celebrate. But Morningstar touched Cole's shoulder in silent thanks. As the sun rose over the Sweetgrass Hills, Cole stood outside the lodge, stretching tired muscles. The camp was beginning to wake, fires rekindled, morning prayers offered, children running to check on favorite horses. It wasn't his world, might never be. But for the first time in 5 years, he didn't feel entirely alone. Swift Elk appeared, leading Cole's mare. The young warrior had obviously been tending her, checking her hooves and brushing her coat. "Your horse," he said carefully in English. "I take care. Good horse. Like you, different, but good." It was as close to acceptance as Cole was likely to get, and he took it gratefully. Whatever came next, he'd earned at least a measure of respect. In a world where he'd lost everything, that felt like wealth beyond measure. 3 days passed before Eleanor could sit up without the world spinning. Cole had developed a routine helping with camp work during the day, learning what he could, then spending evenings by Eleanor's side as she grew stronger. The infection had retreated thanks to the moldy bread treatment, leaving her weak but lucid. On this evening, with the first hints of autumn crisp in the air, she felt well enough to share her story. The lodge was warm with firelight, the coal oil lamp White Crow had obtained from traders casting dancing shadows on the buffalo hide walls. Morningstar worked quietly on a star quilt, her needle flashing in the light. White Crow smoked his clay pipe, the tobacco sweet and pungent. Cole sat cross-legged, having learned it was more respectful than stretching his legs toward the fire. Eleanor fingered the daguerreotype in her locket, showing it briefly a stern-faced white man and a beautiful Lakota woman. "My parents," she said softly. "Father was a missionary. Mother was White Crow's sister, though he rarely speaks of her. She died when I was 7. After that," Cole prompted gently. "Father sent me east, said it was for my education. But really, he couldn't bear looking at me. I reminded him too much of her. Or maybe of his own choices." Her laugh was bitter. "The Quaker school in Philadelphia took me in. They were kind enough, taught me to speak properly, to act like a lady. But I was neither white enough nor Indian enough for anyone's comfort." She closed the locket with a snap. "When I turned 21, they found me a position as a governess. Good family, they said. But the son—" She trailed off, then continued more firmly. "Let's say his intentions weren't honorable. When I refused him and reported it to his mother, I was dismissed. No reference, no recommendation, damaged goods." Morningstar made a sound of sympathy, reaching over to squeeze Eleanor's hand. "That's when I saw the advertisement," Eleanor continued. "Mr. Sullivan of Willow Creek, Montana Territory, merchant seeking respectable wife. He seemed kind in his letters, wrote about building a life together, about needing someone with education to help with his business. I thought I could start over, be someone new." "But you couldn't hide what you are," Cole said. It wasn't a question. "I tried, wore gloves to hide my skin, kept my hair pinned tight, spoke careful Eastern English. But at the Rock Creek station, waiting for the connecting stage," she shuddered, "there was a man there, a buffalo hunter. He'd traded with my mother's people years ago, recognized something in my features, started speaking Lakota to test me. I didn't answer, but my face must have given me away." White Crow's expression darkened. "And then, the stage driver, the station master, 2 other men, they cornered me that night. Said they wouldn't let some half-breed deceive a decent white man. Said they'd teach me to know my place. I fought mother's people, taught me that much before father took me away. Managed to get to the stable, steal a horse. They came after me, but I lost them in the dark. Then I fell from the horse, hit my head." She looked at Cole. "And you found me." Silence settled over the lodge, broken only by the fire's crackle. Finally, White Crow spoke. "You could have ridden past." Cole stared into the fire, gathering his thoughts. No, I couldn't have. Why? Red Sky's voice came from the entrance. None had heard him approach. Why would a white man care about a breed woman in trouble? Cole was quiet for a long moment, then began his own story. Had a ranch down on the Powder River. 600 acres. Started with just 40. Built it up over 10 years cabin first. Then a barn. Then real house with glass windows. Married a girl from town. Sweet little thing named Mary. We were going to have children. Build something lasting. He pulled out his tobacco twist, offering it around before continuing. The drought started slow. First year, we managed. Second year, lost half the cattle. Third year. He shook his head. Mary took fever that winter. Doctor was 2 days away. By the time he came, she was gone. Buried her on the hill overlooking the valley. She always loved the view from there. Morningstar's needle had stopped moving. Even Red Sky had entered fully, settling by the door. After that, nothing mattered much. Couldn't make the bank payments. They gave me 30 days to clear out. Spent 29 of them sitting by Mary's grave. Last day, I saddled up and rode away. Been drifting ever since. You gave up, Red Sky said, but there was less accusation than curiosity in it. Maybe. Or maybe I just couldn't see the point of fighting anymore. Land wants to be empty. Let it be empty. Banks want the property. Let them have it. What's any of it matter without someone to share it with? White Crow studied him through the pipe smoke. Yet you stopped to help my niece. Because that I could do. Couldn't save my wife. Couldn't save my land. But I could help someone who needed it. Maybe that's all any of us can do, just help where we can. Eleanor reached out and touched his hand briefly. I'm glad you stopped. White Crow set down his pipe, his expression growing grave. You speak of loss. Cole Morgan. We understand loss. But ours is different. It's still coming. Every season. More white men arrive. The buffalo grow fewer. The soldiers build more forts. My people face 2 paths. He picked up a piece of birch bark, drawing on it with a charred stick. One path is war. Fight every settler, every soldier, until we're all dead or they give up. Some of our young men want this. His eyes flicked to Red Sky. They see no other way to preserve who we are. And the other path, Cole asked. Adaptation. Learn the white man's ways. Send our children to their schools. Take up farming. Become what they want us to be, and hope they let us keep something of ourselves. The bitterness in his voice was profound. Neither path leads where we wish to go. There might be a third way, Eleanor said quietly. Everyone looked at her. Not war, not surrender, but coexistence. Finding people on both sides who can build bridges, like Cole helping me, like Uncle taking him in. Red Sky laughed harshly. Pretty dreams. Tell that to the soldiers at Sand Creek. Tell that to the hunters killing buffalo for tongues and hides. I'm not saying it would be easy, Eleanor persisted. But what if there were more people willing to see each other as human white settlers who understood your ways, your people who could navigate their world? You mean people like you? Red Sky's tone was mocking. Look how well that served you, rejected by both worlds. Eleanor's chin came up. Yes, rejected, but also surviving. Also here, with family I thought I'd lost forever. Maybe being between worlds isn't a weakness. Maybe it's what's needed. Cole spoke into the tense silence. She's not wrong. Things are changing whether anyone likes it or not. Question is, how do we change with them without losing everything that matters? You lost everything, Red Sky pointed out. You gave up. I did, and I was wrong. Cole met the young warrior's eyes. Been drifting for 5 years, telling myself nothing mattered, but being here, seeing how you all fight to keep your families together, your traditions alive, it matters. The way Morning Star teaches the children the old stories. The way Swift Elk tends the horses. The way White Crow leads with wisdom instead of force. It all matters. White Crow picked up a birch bark scroll, unrolling it to show symbols and pictographs. This tells the story of our people from the beginning. Each generation adds their part. What will this generation add? War, surrender, or something new? Why should we trust any white man to help write that story? Red Sky demanded. Cole thought carefully before answering. You shouldn't. Trust is earned, not given. But maybe, one person at a time, we change that. I can't undo what's been done to your people, can't bring back the buffalo or stop the settlements, but I can stand with you when trouble comes. I can speak truth when lies are told. I can teach what I know and learn what you're willing to share. It's not much, but it's what I have. A man with empty hands, White Crow mused, but a full heart. The earth took from him, yet he gives to others. Eleanor translated his next words. Perhaps that's what these times require, not warriors or farmers, but people who can hold emptiness and fullness at once. Red Sky stood abruptly. Pretty words won't stop bullets. Good intentions won't feed children when the buffalo are gone. No, Cole agreed. They won't. But they might help us find ways to survive without losing our souls. The young warrior stared at him for a long moment, then left without another word. In the silence that followed, Morning Star began to sing softly, a lullaby in Lakota that needed no translation. The fire burned low, casting longer shadows, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled at the rising moon. Tomorrow, White Crow said finally, you'll join the hunting party. Not to hunt, we know you won't take life, but to learn our ways, to understand what we're trying to preserve. Eleanor will continue healing, and we'll all prepare for whatever winter brings snow and cold, certainly, but perhaps also hope. Cole nodded, feeling something shift inside him, a loosening of the grief he'd carried for so long. He wasn't healed, might never be completely, but for the first time in 5 years, he could imagine a future that held more than just endless drifting. As the evening ended and everyone prepared for sleep, Eleanor caught his sleeve. Thank you, she said, for sharing your story, for staying. Thank you, he replied, for reminding me that there's still something worth staying for. Outside, the stars were brilliant in the clear sky, and the camp had settled into nighttime quiet. Cole stood for a moment, breathing in the cold air, feeling the strange peace of being exactly where he was meant to be. Not home that was gone forever, but perhaps something new was possible, built from loss and hope in equal measure. Tomorrow would tell. The morning air bit sharp with the promise of coming winter. Cole sat cross-legged outside Swift Elk's family lodge, struggling with what should have been a simple task, making an arrow. Around him, 4 Lakota men worked with practiced ease, their hands moving in rhythms passed down through countless generations. His own attempts lay before him like accusations shafts that wouldn't stay straight, fletching that came loose, points that wobbled. No, no, laughed Broken Wing, the elder who'd become his patient teacher. Like this, see, the sinew must be wet first, then wrapped, while the wood is still warm. Cole watched the old man's gnarled fingers work with surprising delicacy, wrapping deer sinew around the arrow shaft in a perfect spiral. The sinew would dry and shrink, binding tighter than any modern glue. It was ingenious, but Cole's clumsy attempts drew good-natured mockery from the younger men. Perhaps white men should stick to bullets, Swift Elk teased, though his tone had warmed considerably over the past week. Much easier point and destroy. That's exactly why I want to learn this, Cole replied, trying again. There's patience in making arrows. Care. You have to respect what you're creating and what it's for. 2 horses, a middle-aged warrior with a scarred face, selected a piece of Osage orange wood, showing Cole how to judge its quality. This wood, it comes from far south. We trade for it buffalo robes for bow wood. Each piece must be perfect. No knots, no weak spots. A man's life depends on his bow. Cole ran his fingers along the smooth wood, feeling its density. My grandfather talked about Osage orange. Said it made the best fence posts wouldn't rot. Hard as iron. Fence posts. Two Horses shook his head. White men use sacred wood for fences. The work continued as the sun climbed higher. Cole's arrows slowly improved, though they'd never match the perfect balance of those made by experienced hands. What mattered more was the conversation that flowed with the work stories of hunts, jokes about relatives, observations about the changing weather. Cole found himself included more naturally, his presence no longer a constant source of tension. From across the camp came the sound of children's laughter. Eleanor sat in a cleared area near Morning Star's lodge, surrounded by a dozen young ones ranging from perhaps 4 to 12 years old. She'd drawn letters in the smooth dirt with a stick, teaching them English while maintaining their Lakota. "This is A," she said, making the sound in both languages, like the beginning of apple in English, or Anpetu in Lakota the sun. The children repeated after her, their voices bright with curiosity. One little girl, who Cole had learned was named Dancing Rabbit, carefully copied the letter with her own stick, tongue poking out in concentration. Eleanor had found a small slate and piece of chalk among her salvaged belongings, and she let the children take turns writing on it, a precious thing that they handled with extreme care. She made learning a game, having them find objects around camp that started with each letter, creating stories that wove between both languages. "She's good with them," Two Horses observed, following Cole's gaze. "Patient. She remembers our ways even after so many years away." "She's remarkable," Cole agreed, then caught himself, aware he'd revealed more than intended. Swift Elk grinned. "The white man notices the woman. This surprises no one." Before Cole could respond, a hunting party returned to camp, their horses laden with deer. The lead hunter, a stern man named Black Wolf, approached their group. He spoke to Two Horses in rapid Lakota, gesturing toward Cole. Two Horses translated. "They found a large herd moving toward the winter valleys. Tomorrow they go out again. Black Wolf says you may come not to hunt, but to learn tracking. If you're willing." "I'm willing," Cole said immediately, "though I'm curious why, if I'm not hunting." "Because a man who won't kill should understand what it takes for others to provide meat," Black Wolf said in accented English. "Also, you move quiet for a white man. We've watched. You might learn something useful." That afternoon, Cole found himself beside Eleanor at the hide-scraping frames. It was hard work, using bone tools to clean the deer hides of fat and tissue, preparing them for the smoke tanning process. Their movements fell into sync naturally, working opposite sides of the same hide. "Your arrow making is improving," Eleanor said with a slight smile. "I saw Swift Elk actually nod approval at your last attempt." "High praise indeed," Cole replied dryly. "Only took me 6 tries to make one that didn't immediately fall apart." They worked in comfortable rhythm, the repetitive scraping almost meditative. Around them, women chatted and sang, preparing preserved wild plums and pemmican for winter storage. The normalcy of it all, the domestic peace of people preparing for the season ahead, stood in sharp contrast to the violence and upheaval Cole knew existed beyond this sheltered valley. "Tell me about Willow Creek," Cole said quietly. "About Sullivan?" Eleanor's hands paused briefly, then resumed their work. "Thomas Sullivan, 43 years old, widower, 2 children from his first marriage, owns the largest mercantile in town. His letters were proper, businesslike. He needed a mother for his children, someone educated to help with accounts. I was to receive room, board, and respectability. But not love. Love was never part of the bargain." She focused intently on a stubborn bit of tissue. "I would have honored the agreement, tried to be a good wife and mother, but when those men at Rock Creek said he'd paid them to inspect me first, to make sure I was pure white," she shuddered. "I knew I could never go through with it." "You don't have to," Cole said. "You have choices now." She looked at him directly then, searching his face. "Do I, a half-breed woman with no money, No connections except to a tribe that the government wants to disappear. What choices do I really have? Before Cole could answer, Red Sky approached, his expression unreadable. He'd been gone for 2 days, and his sudden appearance made Eleanor tense. But instead of hostility, he simply sat down and picked up a scraping tool, joining their work. They labored in silence for a while before Red Sky spoke. My sister was 14, bright flower. She loved to laugh, loved to dance. 3 summers ago, soldiers came to our previous camp, said we were harboring hostiles. We weren't, but it didn't matter. His hands never stopped moving, but Cole saw the tension in his shoulders. She ran with the other children when the shooting started. Soldier shot her in the back. She died calling for our mother. Eleanor made a soft sound of sympathy. Red Sky continued, his voice steady but filled with pain. This is why I don't trust white men, why I may never trust them. But, he looked at Cole, I've watched you. You work, you learn, you respect. You don't act like we're less than human. It's confusing. I'm sorry about your sister, Cole said simply. There's nothing I can say that makes it right. No, Red Sky agreed. There isn't. But you also don't pretend there is. And that helps. They worked together as the afternoon waned. 3 people from different worlds bound momentarily by shared labor. As the sun began to sink, Eleanor began to sing a Lakota working song her mother had taught her before memory faded. Red Sky joined in after a moment, his voice harmonizing with hers. Cole didn't know the words, but he hummed along, adding his voice to theirs. That evening, as they prepared the hides for smoking, Eleanor taught the children more letters while Cole helped repair lodge poles damaged in a recent windstorm. The first frost appeared at sunset, delicate crystals forming on the grass, making everything sparkle in the fading light. White Crow called a council after the evening meal. The discussion was in Lakota, but Cole understood enough to know they were debating winter preparations and whether to move camp before the heavy snows. There was also discussion about Eleanor. Her health was improving, and decisions needed to be made about her future. Later, Cole and Eleanor walked to the edge of camp, watching the stars emerge in the clear sky. Their breath made small clouds in the cold air. Winter's coming fast, Eleanor observed, pulling her wool army blanket a trade good tighter around her shoulders. It is. The hunt tomorrow will probably be one of the last big ones before the snows. She was quiet for a moment, then asked, What will you do when winter truly arrives? You can't drift in the deep snow. White Crow has offered shelter through the winter. If I continue to help the camp, apparently, my strange remedy for infection has earned some credit. He paused. What about you? Uncle wants me to stay, to be with my people again. But I don't know if I belong here any more than I belonged in the East. I'm caught between worlds. Cole turned to face her fully. Maybe that's not a weakness. Maybe that's exactly what's needed now, people who can stand in both worlds. Translate between them. Not just language, but understanding. She looked up at him, and in the starlight, he could see tears in her eyes. Sometimes I think you see me more clearly than I see myself. I see someone brave enough to cross a continent for a new life, strong enough to survive an attack, wise enough to teach children, kind enough to forgive a world that's been cruel to her. He reached out, hesitated, then gently touched her hand. I see someone remarkable. She didn't pull away. Instead, she intertwined her fingers with his, and they stood together in the gathering cold, watching the stars wheel overhead. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: the hunt, decisions about the future, the continuing struggle to survive in a changing world. But tonight, in this moment, 2 lonely souls had found something precious: the possibility of belonging, not to a place or a people, but to each other. The wolf howled again in the distance, and somewhere in the camp, a baby cried and was quickly soothed. Life continued its ancient rhythms, even as the world shifted around them. Cole squeezed Eleanor's hand gently, and she squeezed back a promise without words, a hope despite everything, a choice made in the space between heartbeats. The riders came with the dawn, their horses' breath steaming in the frost-heavy air. Cole was helping Black Wolf prepare for the morning hunt when the camp dogs erupted in furious barking. 3 men approached from the east, their silhouettes dark against the rising sun. Even at a distance, everything about them spoke of trouble, the aggressive pace, the rifles prominently displayed, the arrogant posture of men who expected compliance. Cole recognized the type immediately. He'd seen them in every frontier town, men who used paper and law as weapons more effectively than any gun. The lead rider was heavy-set, wearing a black wool coat that had seen better days and a hat that might have been fashionable back east. The 2 flankers looked like hired muscle, one with a coiled bullwhip hanging from his saddle horn, the other displaying Pinkerton badges on his vest like trophies. The camp came alive with controlled urgency. Women gathered children, moving them toward the center lodges. Warriors appeared as if from nowhere, weapons visible but not raised. White Crow emerged from his lodge wearing his finest shirt, the one with beaded eagles across the chest, a clear signal that he would meet this threat as a leader, not a warrior. "Eleanor Sullivan," the lead rider's voice boomed across the camp. "I know you're here. Woman, come out and face your obligations." Eleanor emerged from Morningstar's lodge, and Cole saw her transformation. The confident teacher of yesterday was gone, replaced by someone fighting not to show terror. Her hands trembled as she pulled her blanket tighter, and her face had gone pale as prairie dust. Cole moved without thinking, placing himself between her and the approaching riders. The heavy man dismounted with obvious difficulty, pulling a leather portfolio from his saddlebag. "Thomas Sullivan," he announced, as if the name itself carried authority. "I've come for my bride." Up close, Sullivan was even less impressive, jowls already going to fat despite being barely 40, small eyes that never quite met anyone's gaze directly, soft hands that had never known real work. But he had the dangerous quality of a man used to getting his way through money and influence rather than strength. "You must be the savage who's been harboring her," Sullivan said to White Crow, who stood with remarkable dignity despite the insult. "I'll thank you to produce her immediately. I have legal documents." He pulled out a sheaf of papers, waving them like weapons. Cole could see the territorial seal, the elaborate script of legal language designed to intimidate. A binding contract of marriage, signed and witnessed, transportation paid in full, breach of contract penalties clearly stated. "She belongs to me." "No one belongs to anyone," Cole said quietly, not moving from his position in front of Eleanor. Sullivan's eyes narrowed, taking in Cole's worn clothing, his weather-beaten face. "And who might you be? Another savage lover, or just some drifter putting his nose where it doesn't belong?" "Just a man who knows the difference between a contract and ownership." The Pinkerton with the badges stepped forward. "Mr. Sullivan has legal rights here. The woman took his money, signed his papers. Law is clear on this." "The law," White Crow said in careful English, "does not run here. This is Lakota land." Sullivan laughed, an ugly sound. "Lakota land? For how long month, year the railroad's coming, Chief? The Army's building new forts. Your land is disappearing mile by mile, but right now, today, that woman owes me a debt." Eleanor stepped out from behind Cole, though he could see the effort it cost her. "I'll repay the transportation costs, every penny." "With what?" Sullivan sneered. "You came to me with nothing. You are nothing. A half-breed playing at being white. Thinking you could fool me." His voice turned venomous. "The men at Rock Creek told me what you really are, but I'm generous, I'll still take you. You'll work off the debt in my store, keep my house, raise my children, better than you deserve." "She deserves respect," Cole said, his voice carrying an edge now. "She deserves choice." Sullivan's face reddened. "Choice? She made her choice when she signed my papers, when she took my money. Money you paid to have her inspected, Cole shot back. Money you used to buy men to assault her. That voids any contract in any court worth its salt. The quiet murmur of translation rippled through the watching Lakota. Red Sky had appeared at Cole's shoulder, and Swift Elk flanked Eleanor's other side. The tribe was closing ranks, a clear message even Sullivan couldn't miss. The man with the bullwhip shifted in his saddle. "Mr. Sullivan, maybe we should—" "Shut up," Sullivan snapped. He turned back to Eleanor. "You think these savages will protect you forever? You think this drifter will stand between us when the cavalry comes? Because make no mistake, girl, I have friends. Important friends. One word from me and this whole camp could be cleared out for harboring a fugitive." Eleanor was shaking now, but her voice was steady. "I was never a fugitive. I was a woman escaping assault." "Prove it," Sullivan challenged. "Your word a breed's word against respectable white men. Who do you think the law will believe?" Cole felt something cold settle in his stomach. Sullivan was right about how such things usually went. The law, such as it was on the frontier, rarely favored anyone who wasn't white, male, and moneyed. But then he had an idea. "How much?" Cole asked. Sullivan blinked. "What?" "The transportation costs. How much to buy out her contract?" Sullivan pulled out a paper, scanning it with theatrical precision. $347, plus interest, plus breach penalties. Call it an even $500. It was an outrageous sum, more than most men saw in a year. Cole reached into his coat, pulling out a small leather pouch. From it, he produced a banknote that made Sullivan's eyes widen. A $1,000 note from the First National Bank of Denver. "This covers it," Cole said simply. "Twice over." The camp had gone completely silent. Eleanor stared at him in shock. Even White Crow looked surprised. "Where did a saddle tramp like you get that kind of money?" Sullivan demanded, suspicion clear in his voice. "Insurance settlement," Cole said quietly. "From when my wife died. Never could bring myself to spend it. Blood money. It felt like, but buying someone's freedom, Mary would have approved of that." Sullivan reached for the note, but Cole pulled it back. "First, you write up a release, legal and binding, stating that Eleanor Sullivan owes you nothing, that all contracts are void, that you have no further claim on her. And if I refuse," White Crow spoke then, his voice carrying quiet authority, "then you leave with nothing, and you never come back." Sullivan looked around at the assembled warriors, at the women and children watching from doorways, at the three people standing united before him. His hired men were already backing their horses away, clearly wanting no part of a potential fight. With shaking hands born of rage rather than fear, Sullivan pulled out paper and pen from his portfolio. He wrote quickly, angrily, the pen scratching loud in the silence. When finished, he threw the paper at Cole's feet. Cole picked it up, read it carefully, then handed it to Eleanor. "Is this sufficient?" She read it, tears streaming down her face. "Yes." Only then did Cole hand over the banknote. Sullivan snatched it, examining it carefully for authenticity, then tucked it away. He turned to Eleanor, his face ugly with thwarted possession. "You've made a mistake, girl. You could have had respectability, a home, a name. Now what are you, nothing but a squaw in a savage camp?" Eleanor stepped forward, and for a moment Cole thought she might strike him. Instead, she pulled off the simple gold band Sullivan had sent with his first letter, the ring she'd worn on a chain around her neck. Unable to quite throw it away, she held it out to him. "I am Wiaka Washte," she said clearly. "Good feather, daughter of two peoples, teacher of children, survivor of your violence. I am exactly who I choose to be." Sullivan took the ring, his face purpling. "The cavalry will hear about this camp harboring fugitives and thieves. That money was probably stolen." "The money," Cole interrupted, "has my bank's certification and my lawyer's signature. Try to claim it's stolen, and you'll find yourself in court explaining how you paid men to assault a woman." Sullivan mounted his horse with clumsy anger. His men already turned to leave. "This isn't over. The railroad needs this land. The army wants these savages moved. You've chosen the losing side, both of you. And when winter comes, when the government comes, remember, you could have chosen civilization." "We did," Eleanor said quietly. "Just not your version of it." Sullivan spurred his horse viciously, and the three men galloped away, dust rising behind them like smoke. The camp remained still for a long moment after they'd gone, then slowly returned to morning activities. But Cole saw the worried looks, heard the quiet discussions. Sullivan's threats about the cavalry weren't empty, everyone knew that. Eleanor turned to Cole, her face a mix of emotions. "That money, you gave up everything you had left." "No," Cole said. "I gave up everything that was holding me to the past. There's a difference." She threw her arms around him then, surprising them both. He held her as she shook, not with fear anymore, but with the release of it. Around them, the camp watched with approval. Even Red Sky nodded slightly before turning away. White Crow approached as they separated. "You've made an enemy. Sullivan will not forget this insult." "Probably not," Cole agreed. "But some stands are worth taking regardless of consequences." "And if he brings the soldiers?" Cole looked at Eleanor. Then at the camp around them, children resuming their games, women returning to their work, warriors discussing the delayed hunt. "Then we face that together. All of us." Morning Star appeared with sage smoke, cleansing the air where Sullivan had stood, removing his poisonous presence from their space. The ritual was simple but powerful, a reclaiming of peace after violation. "Come," White Crow said. "We must counsel. Winter approaches, and now we have new troubles to consider. But first," he looked at Eleanor with grandfatherly affection, "you are truly free now. What will you choose?" Eleanor looked at Cole, then at her uncle, then at the camp that had become more home in weeks than anywhere had been in years. "I choose to stay, to teach, to build bridges between worlds, if you'll have me." "And you?" White Crow asked Cole. "You've spent your fortune on someone else's freedom. What do you have left?" Cole thought of his empty hands, now empty pockets. Nothing to his name but his horse and the clothes he wore. He thought of Mary, buried on a hill he'd never see again. He thought of 5 years of drifting, of running from everything that mattered. "I have today," he said finally. "I have the choice to help instead of harm. I have the chance to stand for something again. That's more than I've had in years." Red Sky approached, and to everyone's surprise, offered his hand to Cole. "You acted with honor, like a warrior, even without weapons. Perhaps some white men can be trusted. Some." It was as close to acceptance as Cole would get, and he took it gratefully. As the camp returned to normal life, he found himself standing with Eleanor again, watching the sun climb higher into the clear autumn sky. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for the money, for seeing me as worth saving." "You were never someone who needed saving," Cole replied. "You just needed someone to stand beside you while you saved yourself." She took his hand then, in full view of the camp, a public declaration more binding than any contract Sullivan could have produced. Together they faced the western horizon where dust still lingered from the rider's departure. Winter was coming. Trouble was coming. But for the first time in years, neither of them would face it alone, would. Dawn came gray and cold, with clouds hanging low over the sweetgrass hills like a wool blanket. Cole hadn't slept. None of them had. Sullivan's threats had taken only 2 days to manifest yesterday. Lakota scouts had spotted a large party moving toward the camp from Willow Creek. 20 men at least, some wearing badges, all armed. They'd make camp for the night, then arrive with the morning sun. The camp moved with quiet efficiency, everyone knowing their role without needing to be told. Women packed essential belongings into parfleches, ready to flee if violence erupted. Children were gathered in the centermost lodge, where Morning Star and the elder women would protect them. The elderly and infirm were moved to travois, prepared for quick evacuation into the hills where horses couldn't easily follow. Cole sat at White Crow's fire, helping the chief draft documents in English. His hand was steady as he wrote, though his heart raced with the knowledge of what dawn might bring. Eleanor sat beside him, translating his words into terms that would hold weight in territorial court. I, Eleanor Sullivan, known also as Wiaka Washday, do hereby testify that I entered into correspondence with Thomas Sullivan under false pretenses created by him, not by me. He claimed to seek an educated wife and mother for his children. In truth, he sought unpaid labor and— Eleanor's voice caught, but she continued, and ownership of a woman he could control without consequence. Cole continued writing as she spoke, creating a legal record of her free choice. Her assault at Rock Creek, Sullivan's payment to those men, and her decision to remain with her mother's people. White Crow added his mark as witness, along with Red Sky and 3 other warriors. It might not stop violence, but it would create a paper trail that someone, somewhere, might eventually see. You should leave, Red Sky said suddenly, looking at Cole. This isn't your fight. You're white. You could ride out. Tell them you were just passing through. Cole sealed the documents with candle wax, pressing White Crow's ring into it to create an official-looking seal. 5 weeks ago, that's exactly what I would have done. Kept my head down, stayed uninvolved, drifted on. He looked up at Red Sky. But that man is gone. Or maybe he finally woke up. Either way, I'm not running. Swift Elk entered the lodge, frost still clinging to his hair. They're breaking camp, moving this way. 1 hour, maybe less. White Crow stood, his movements showing his years, but also his strength. Then we prepare for whatever comes. But remember, we do not fire first. We are not the aggressors here. Cole strapped on his gun belt for the first time since arriving at the camp. The weight felt wrong, unwelcome, but necessary. He checked the loads, then let his coat fall over it. Violence was the last option, but he'd learned that sometimes the threat of resistance was enough to prevent its necessity. Eleanor emerged from Morningstar's lodge wearing her mother's dress, soft doeskin decorated with porcupine quills and trade beads. Her hair hung loose in the Lakota fashion, and she'd painted a single red line across her cheekbones. She was declaring herself, choosing her identity publicly and proudly. You look like her, White Crow said softly. Like my sister, when she was young. Before she fell in love with the missionary and tried to live in 2 worlds at once. Maybe she succeeded, Eleanor replied. She gave me life in both worlds. Now I choose to honor both. The sun broke the horizon as the riders appeared, spreading out in a long line as they approached the camp. Cole counted 22 men. Most looked like typical frontier toughs, hired guns and unemployed cowboys making wages however they could. But 3 stood out: Sullivan himself, trying to look martial on a horse too fine for the terrain. A lean man with a sheriff's star prominent on his coat, and beside him, an older man in a black suit with the bearing of real authority. The federal marshal. Cole's stomach tightened. Federal law superseded territorial, and a federal marshal could call in the army if he deemed it necessary. This man held the camp's fate in his weathered hands. White Crow walked out to meet them, flanked by his warriors. Cole and Eleanor followed, along with Red Sky and Black Wolf. They stopped 30 feet from the riders, far enough to show they weren't intimidated, close enough to speak without shouting. The sheriff spoke first, a man trying to sound more confident than he felt. I'm Sheriff Watson from Willow Creek. This here is Federal Marshal Thompson. We're here on official business regarding a breach of contract and possible kidnapping. No one has been kidnapped, White Crow said with dignity. A woman sought shelter. We gave it. Sullivan pushed his horse forward. She's right there, Eleanor Sullivan. My legal bride living with savages, dressed like one of them. I am not your anything, Eleanor said clearly. I never was. Marshal Thompson raised a hand for silence, And Cole noticed how everyone, even Sullivan, immediately complied. This was a man used to being obeyed. He was perhaps 60, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Those eyes swept over the assembled group, lingered on Eleanor, studied White Crow, then fixed on Cole. The marshal's expression changed surprise, recognition, then something almost like wonder. Cole Morgan! Cole Morgan from the Powder River! Cole's hand instinctively moved away from his gun. Yes, sir, though it's been 5 years since I could claim that address. Thompson dismounted, handed his reins to the sheriff, and walked forward alone. The gesture was significant. He was meeting them as equals, not as a force of authority. You probably don't remember me. 8 years ago, the Platte River crossing at high water. Memory flooded back. A desperate father. A wagon overturned in flooding water. A young girl swept downstream. Cole had ridden in without thinking. Caught her just before the rapids. Nearly drowned himself getting her to shore. He'd ridden away before the family could properly thank him, embarrassed by the attention. Your daughter, Cole said. Rebecca. She was 10, 11. She's 19 now. Married last year to a good man in Denver. She named her first son Cole. Thompson's voice carried emotion carefully controlled. I looked for you for 2 years. Wanted to thank you properly. Heard about your troubles, later the drought, your wife. I'm sorry for your losses. Marshal Thompson, Sullivan interrupted, his voice high with impatience. This is all very touching, but we have business here. That woman, Thompson said, turning with sudden authority, appears to be making her own choices. Miss, forgive me. What should I call you? Eleanor, she said, or Wiaka Washte, in my mother's tongue. Miss Eleanor, are you here of your own free will? I am. Has anyone forced you to stay against your wishes? No one. I choose to be here, with my family. Thompson pulled out Sullivan's contracts, studying them with the eye of someone who'd seen plenty of legal documents. Mr. Sullivan, these papers indicate a marriage contract. Exactly. Signed and paid for. Thompson continued reading. I see here that you paid 3 men at Rock Creek to verify the bride's suitability. Can you explain that? Sullivan's face reddened. Just ensuring I wasn't being deceived. About her race. And when they discovered her mixed heritage, what were their instructions? To send her back east. Eleanor stepped forward. They tried to assault me. They said Mr. Sullivan had paid them to teach me my place if I wasn't pure white. I fled for my life. Thompson's expression hardened. Mr. Sullivan, paying men to assault a woman voids any contract, regardless of its other terms. Moreover, contracts signed under false pretenses such as hiding your true intentions are legally meaningless. You can't take her word over mine. She's a half-breed. The marshal's voice could have frozen flame. In my experience, Mr. Sullivan, a person's honesty has nothing to do with their bloodline. And everything I see here, including Mr. Morgan's presence, which tells me more about character than any paper could suggest this woman is telling the truth. He turned to the sheriff. Watson, do you have any territorial warrants for anyone here? Watson shuffled uncomfortably. Well, no, but Mr. Sullivan said. What Mr. Sullivan said and what the law requires are apparently 2 different things. Thompson pulled out a leather folder, removing several papers. However, I do have federal warrants. Mr. Jennings, he pointed to one of Sullivan's hired men. Wanted for mail fraud in Kansas. Mr. Birch, another man. Assault and battery in Nebraska. And Mr. Sullivan. Sullivan went pale. What about me? It seems your former business partner in Chicago has been looking for you. Something about embezzled funds and forged documents. He's offered a substantial reward for information leading to your whereabouts. The camp had gone completely silent. Even the morning birds seemed to pause their songs. Sullivan's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. "Now," Thompson continued, his voice carrying the weight of federal authority, "I could arrest all three of you right now, or Mr. Sullivan can sign a document releasing all claims on Miss Eleanor, agreeing never to contact her again, and the three of you can ride away. You have 30 seconds to decide." "This is outrageous," Sullivan sputtered. "You're taking the word of savages and drifters over respectable white citizens." "I'm taking the word of a man who saved my daughter's life," Thompson replied. "A man who gave up his last dollar to buy a woman's freedom when he could have stayed silent. Yes, Mr. Sullivan, I heard about that too. News travels fast on the frontier." Cole felt Eleanor's hand slip into his, squeezing tight. Around them, the Lakota warriors remained alert but no longer coiled for violence. The danger was passing like a summer storm, leaving clear skies behind. Sullivan signed the release with shaking hands, his face purple with rage and humiliation. As his men prepared to leave, he turned for one last venomous comment, but Thompson cut him off. "Mr. Sullivan, if I hear of you or your men coming within 50 miles of this camp, those warrants I mentioned will suddenly become very active. Do I make myself clear?" Sullivan nodded mutely, spurring his horse away with his remaining men following. Several of the hired guns looked relieved to be leaving without bloodshed. Sheriff Watson prepared to follow, but paused. "Marshal, what do I tell the town about the woman?" Thompson mounted his horse with easy grace despite his years. "Tell them that Eleanor Sullivan died on the prairie, because she did. The woman who stands here is Wyaka Washday, and she's under federal protection as a member of the Lakota Nation." He looked at White Crow. "Chief, I can't promise the government won't eventually want this land, but I can promise that as long as I wear this badge, your camp won't be harassed without cause." White Crow nodded gravely. "Your word is good. We have seen this." As the lawmen prepared to leave, Thompson guided his horse close to Cole. "Morgan, you've got friends in Denver if you ever need them." "My door is always open." "I appreciate that." "Marshal, but I think I've found where I belong." Thompson looked at Eleanor, at the camp, at the life Cole was choosing. "I believe you have. Take care of each other." As the riders disappeared into the distance, the camp erupted in quiet celebration. Children emerged from hiding, women ululated in victory, warriors clasped hands and shoulders in relief. The threat had passed without blood, without loss, without surrender. Red Sky approached Cole, his face showing an emotion Cole had never seen from him before respect. The young warrior extended his hand, and when Cole took it, Red Sky pulled him into a brief embrace. "You stood with us," Red Sky said simply. "Not behind us, not in front of us, but with us. You are my brother now." The words carried weight that no legal document could match. Cole found his throat tight with emotion. "I'm honored." White Crow called for a celebration, modest but heartfelt. As the camp rejoiced in their peaceful victory, Cole stood with Eleanor, watching the sun climb higher into a sky that seemed suddenly full of possibility. "You gave up everything for me," Eleanor said softly. "No," Cole replied, putting his arm around her. "I gave up nothing that mattered, and gained everything that does." She leaned into him, and together they watched their people, for they were their people now. Both of them prepare for whatever future would come. The railroad might advance, the government might pressure, the world might change, but today they had won something precious, the right to choose their own path. Justice and law had aligned, just this once, and in that alignment, Cole found something he'd thought lost forever: hope. The first snow came 3 weeks after Sullivan's departure, fat flakes falling soft as goose down through still air. Cole stood at the edge of camp, choosing the spot where two worlds might meet. The land here formed a natural shelf, protected by a granite outcrop to the north but open to the valley where settlers would eventually come. It was neither fully in the Lakota camp nor fully separate a bridge location for what he and Eleanor hoped to build. "Here," he said to Black Wolf, who'd come to help him pace out the dimensions. Close enough to the camp for protection, far enough to give both peoples comfort when they need to meet. Black Wolf studied the location with a hunter's eye for terrain. Good drainage, wind protection, water access from the creek. You think like someone planning to stay. I am staying. Cole marked the corners with stones, envisioning walls, windows, a door that would welcome visitors from both worlds. This is home now. The decision had come naturally after the confrontation with Sullivan. White Crow had formally invited him to winter with the tribe. But Cole knew he needed something more, not just shelter, but purpose. The cabin would be that purpose. A physical declaration of his commitment to this new life. Construction began immediately, racing against winter's grip. The entire camp participated, making it a community effort rather than a solitary endeavor. Swift Elk and the young warriors helped fell trees, choosing lodgepole pines that stood straight and true. The women, led by Morning Star, provided food for the workers and advice on positioning that Cole would have never considered, where morning sun would warm the entrance, how snowdrifts would form, which direction cooking smoke should drift. Eleanor worked beside him every day, her hands as calloused as his from stripping bark and chinking logs with mud and grass. They talked as they worked, planning not just a cabin, but a future. 3 rooms to start, Eleanor said, sketching in the dirt. Main room for living and teaching, bedroom, and a small space for storage, but built so we can add on. Add on? Cole paused in his work, looking at her with raised eyebrows. She blushed, but met his gaze steadily. Families need room to grow. Red Sky, who'd become a regular helper despite his initial resistance, laughed. First finish the cabin, then speak of filling it with children. Say you, boys. As the walls rose, log by careful log, something else was building acceptance that went beyond mere tolerance. Cole taught the young men his construction techniques, learned from years of maintaining his ranch buildings. They taught him their methods of insulation using packed earth and dried grass. The fusion created something stronger than either tradition alone. By the winter solstice, the cabin stood complete, rough but solid, with real glass windows that White Crow had acquired through trade, a luxury that drew admiring visitors. The iron stove, salvaged from an abandoned homestead Swift Elk had found, threw heat that kept the space warm even as temperatures plunged. Eleanor had made curtains from traded calico, and buffalo robes covered the floor. It was humble but theirs. On Christmas Eve, a date that meant something to Eleanor from her Eastern education, they held their first gathering. The cabin filled with curious visitors, Lakota families mixing carefully with 2 settler families from the valley who'd heard about the white man living peacefully with the tribe. Eleanor served coffee and wojapi, the traditional berry pudding Morning Star had taught her to make. Children played together, initially shy, then gradually forgetting they were supposed to be different. That night, after everyone had gone, Cole and Eleanor stood in their doorway watching stars emerge in the crystal-clear sky. We're doing something important here, Eleanor said. Something that matters. Building bridges, Cole agreed. 1 cup of coffee, 1 conversation at a time. Winter deepened, bringing the quiet time of stories and indoor work. Eleanor established her school in the main room of the cabin, teaching children from both communities. She used McGuffey readers alongside traditional Lakota stories, arithmetic on slate boards next to beadwork mathematics. Parents who'd initially been skeptical began to see the value their children learning skills for both worlds. Cole spent the cold months making furniture, learning decorative carving from Broken Wing, who despite his gnarled hands could create beauty from simple wood. They made desks for the school, sturdy and smooth, each one carved with a small symbol representing the child who would use it: a horse for Swift Elk's nephew, a star for Dancing Rabbit, a tree for the settler boy named Thomas, who walked 3 miles each way to attend lessons. As winter began its slow retreat, something shifted between Cole and Eleanor. The careful friendship, the partnership of necessity, had transformed into something deeper. They moved around each other with the easy familiarity of long-married couples, finishing each other's sentences, working in comfortable silence that needed no words. One evening in early March, as they prepared lessons for the next day, Eleanor suddenly stopped. "Cole, what are we doing?" He looked up from the map he was drawing for geography lessons. "Teaching children." "No, I mean, us. What are we to each other?" Cole set down his charcoal, considering. They'd been dancing around this question for months. "You're the reason I stopped drifting, the reason I remembered how to hope, the person I want to wake up next to for whatever days I have left." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "When I was traveling here, to marry a stranger, I thought I was choosing safety over happiness. I never imagined I'd find both." "Marry me," Cole said suddenly, then laughed at himself. "I mean, properly. Both ways your mother's tradition and the one you learned in the East. Make it real in every world we touch." She crossed the room and kissed him. Answer enough. The ceremony took place on the spring equinox, when day and night balanced perfectly. White Crow performed the Lakota ritual at dawn, wrapping Cole and Eleanor in a star quilt Morning Star had made, their hands bound with sweetgrass rope as they made vows in Lakota. The entire camp attended, drums beating in celebration, prayers offered for fertility and long life. That afternoon, Marshal Thompson arrived as promised, having made the journey from Denver specifically to officiate. He performed a simple Christian ceremony in the cabin, with both Lakota and settler families present. Eleanor wore her mother's wedding dress, doeskin white as fresh snow, decorated with hundreds of tiny shells. Cole wore his one good shirt, cleaned and pressed, with a vest Morning Star had beaded with geometric patterns that told the story of two paths becoming one. "Do you, Cole Morgan, take Wiyaka Washday, also known as Eleanor, to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do, with everything I have and everything I am." "Do you, Eleanor, take Cole to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do. In both worlds I walk, with all my heart." Thompson smiled as he pronounced them married, and White Crow stepped forward to place his hands over theirs, a blessing that transcended any single tradition. Through the cabin windows, the sun broke through clouds that had threatened rain, casting golden light over the mixed gathering. The celebration lasted well into the night, with dancing that blended Lakota and frontier traditions, Swift Elk's drum accompanying a settler's fiddle in unlikely harmony. Even Red Sky danced, teaching the settler children basic steps while their parents watched with nervous wonder. A year later, almost to the day, Cole stood in a field teaching a mixed group of children how to gentle wild horses. His methods had become famous in the valley: patience over force, partnership over domination. The children, Lakota and white alike, watched with rapt attention as he worked with a young Mustang, showing them how to read the animal's body language, how to offer respect and receive trust in return. Eleanor watched from the cabin doorway, her hand resting on her swollen belly. Their first child would arrive with the summer, and Morning Star had already predicted a son, though Singing Crow insisted it would be a daughter with Eleanor's eyes and Cole's stubborn streak. The school had grown beyond their single room, with help from both communities. They'd added a proper classroom to the cabin, with a small library of donated books and maps that showed both the United States and the traditional territories of the Plains tribes. Parents who'd initially been suspicious now competed to have their children enrolled, seeing the advantage of education that prepared them for multiple futures. Red Sky rode up as the lesson ended, dismounting with news that made his face shine with cautious hope. "Treaty negotiations in Fort Laramie. The government offers reserved land, not all we deserve, but enough to live on, and rights to hunt in the old territories for 50 years. It wasn't perfect, wasn't just, but it was better than the war that would otherwise come." White Crow had been part of the negotiations, arguing for adaptation with dignity rather than destruction with honor. "There's more," Red Sky continued, his English much improved from Eleanor's lessons. "They want teachers for the reservation schools, teachers who understand both worlds." He looked at Eleanor meaningfully. "The pay is small, but the houses are solid, and the need is great." Eleanor and Cole exchanged glances. It would mean leaving the cabin they'd built, the bridge they'd created. But it would also mean extending that bridge, helping more children navigate the changing world. We'll think about it, Cole said, but he already knew their answer. They would go where they were needed most. That evening, as spring sunset painted the hills gold and purple, the extended family gathered for dinner. White Crow, aged but still strong, told stories of the winter's hunt. Morning Star taught settler women her beadwork patterns. Children played in the fading light, their laughter carrying no accent of race or culture. The photograph studio from Willow Creek had visited the month before, and the resulting portrait sat on the mantel Cole and Eleanor centered, surrounded by both families, all looking forward with hope, despite the shadows everyone knew were coming. "You did this," Eleanor said to Cole as they prepared for bed. "You built this piece." "We built it," he corrected, "and we'll keep building it, wherever we go." She nestled against him, their child moving between them, a future neither had imagined when they'd first met beside a lightning-struck cottonwood. Outside, an owl called across the darkness, and somewhere distant, a coyote answered. The world was vast and changing, full of challenges that would test everything they'd built. But tonight, in their cabin where two worlds met and found peace, they were home. Cole thought of his grandmother's words about kindness being its own reward, of empty hands and full hearts, of the courage to choose hope over fear. He'd lost everything once: his ranch, his wife, his purpose. But here, in this unlikely place with these unexpected people, he'd found something worth any price: a love that bridged worlds, a family that transcended blood, and a future bright with possibility. The lamp burned low as they drifted toward sleep, and through the window, stars emerged in the endless Montana sky, the same stars that had witnessed all the sorrow and joy of the frontier, now watching over a small cabin where healing had taken root and bloomed into something beautiful. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But tonight, two hearts rested together, complete. Cole and Eleanor's story reminds us that family isn't always bound by blood. It's forged through acts of courage, kindness, and the choice to stand together when the world demands we stand apart. Cole discovered that empty hands could still give, that a man who'd lost everything could still choose to help others. Eleanor learned that being caught between two worlds wasn't a weakness but a strength, allowing her to build bridges others couldn't imagine. Their greatest act wasn't fighting their enemies, but choosing gratitude over bitterness. Cole could have let loss make him hard. Eleanor could have let rejection make her small. Instead, they opened their hearts to unexpected family White Crow's wisdom, Morning Star's tenderness, even Red Sky's eventual brotherhood. They proved that true wealth isn't measured in dollars or acres, but in the community we build and the love we share. In that dusty Montana territory, they created something revolutionary, a place where different peoples could meet as equals, where children could learn from multiple traditions, where understanding triumphed over prejudice. Have you ever faced rejection or judgment simply for being who you are? Like Eleanor did at Rock Creek, how did you find your own bridge to belonging?